So at this point, I think we're going to take some questions.
So we've had a couple of questions asked online. Folks, please feel free to type in more questions. So one of the questions relates to the DR. Can DR evaluate time of use rates rather than DR events?
So I think the quick answer to that is not really. There is the ability to, let me think for a second here.
I'll jump in, Scott, while you're thinking. So one can think of the DR signal as one thing, and the utility rates and the pricing is the second thing. So if the DR signal, as Scott described, triggers a change in use, and that shifts use to different times of day, and you have selected a time of use rate, and I'm going to describe utility rate options in BEopt as the next section of the presentation. So if you have a time of use rate selected and you select DR and it shifts electrical use, then you would see an effect in the time of use rate. So in that sense, the answer is yes. Now, if you were asking a question about whether you wanted to use a time of use rate as the signal to trigger the DR, not so clear about that.
Okay. So there is another question that sort of relates to what you just said, Craig, which is, are the utility rates mapped to the zip code one selects?
I will describe that in the next part of the presentation, I think, Priya.
Okay.
Or Smita.
And so another question is, are the weather files that are implemented in the California metrics portion, are they the Title 24, the new Title 24 2013 files?
Let's see. I think that is correct, but we better double check that we've got the latest in BEopt.
Okay. Another question is related to the cost data. So Scott, perhaps can just go back to that briefly. But the question is, are the costs specific to location or national, and how does one get the California multiplier for material and labor costs?
So the cost that BEopt ships are all national at the moment. See if I can find this site screen here. On the site screen, there are inputs to put in both the material cost multiplier and the labor cost multiplier. They do default to 1. There's also the ability for users to BEopt ships with a rich set of cost data, but the user has ultimate flexibility to modify any of those costs and put in their own costs if they have better cost data available to them.
Okay. So I think one part of the question was, do you have suggestions on where to find this cost multiplier for California? So you defaulted to 1, but is there any suggestion on sources on what would one look up a cost multiplier?
And the RS means database does have cost multipliers, I believe, for every state of the country. Beyond that, beyond that, I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Another question is related to who is the intended user of the DR module. Is that more for the utility program developers, and what are the use cases for it?
So that's a good question. Yes, I would say utility program developers, planners, analysts would be potential users. Possibly, so that's one use case is with regard to utility programs. I could envision technology developers that might want to use this, and perhaps building designers for things like pre-cooling strategies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One last question we'll address before moving on to the next section is related to energy storage. So there have been a number of questions on about energy storage. So Craig, you want to cover that and clarify the original intent and what panned out?
Yes, thanks, Rita. So the original scope of work for the project included a task on energy storage that encompassed both electrical storage and thermal energy storage. As we redirected, we're redirected in the scope of work to do the to work on the BEopt California Simulation Engine connection. The energy storage work was limited to the capability to look at sort of passive thermal mass effects in the building via scheduling of the thermostat. So we actually did not do the electrical energy storage task.
Okay, so we'll continue on to the next section, and any other questions that folks have, we'll just save them for either the end, time permitting, or definitely be able to pass it on to the researchers to address offline.